Good morning and welcome to Iron Horse History. So today I wanted to go through and just do some updates on the truck. I know this is going to be a little bit random as far as everything that I talk about, where it kind of comes from, but I want to talk about all of the little updates that I've made so far and give you an idea as to where this project really stands, where every little piece kind of is, where my plans have moved from, and give you a good solid foundation as far as where I want to go with this project. So I want to start with the firewall, and then I'll move on to another project that I will also talk about later in this video. And then I also want to introduce you to the motor and my ideas with that. So as we can see here, I added the coil pack that I added this to the firewall because I wanted everything to kind of run along the motor right here. Right kind of as it comes off of this, it'll kind of drop and then run along the motor here. I'll show you that bracket on the actual motor here in a few minutes. This is my fuel pressure regulator. I went with a really nice setup that's adjustable. I wanted something that I can really like dial in and make sure it's good, especially because the carburetor that I have obviously doesn't have like the standard fuel log on like a Holley 4150, 4160 style, so I'm not going to add a gauge to the actual fuel log on that. So projects to show you just that are a little bit previous. Along here you can kind of see some of the wiring that I've added and changed and done. This is off of the coil for the distributor. Fuel line is right here, doesn't have anything in it, so it's it's not flammable or anything like that right now. And then this is all of my wiring loom so far that I've put together. I made the mistake as I was putting together things and looming everything together. This plug that runs to the distributor was directly wired into the distributor, and I believed that I could pull it just right here off of these two lugs and put it back to the distributor, which kind of would have worked, except that it was all part of this loom and all zip tied in and nice and pretty, and I realized I need some way to still get the motor out and have this all disconnected and stay with the truck and stay with the body of the truck. So this is my best effort to kind of make all of that happen and work the way that I want it to, in accordance with all of the little pieces and parts that are going into this. To move along that wiring harness, as you can see, I ran a main wire, which this is a 6-gauge wire off of what will be the alternator. This runs down across here and into this terminal block, which also has the main battery cable that runs back to the battery. That also runs out to where the starter will be, and this little wire, which is my starter solenoid wire. And then I used this wire here as just a body ground, a chassis ground from the engine to the chassis. I have not added a body ground yet, except for right there, right here. This is a body ground, but it only just goes into all of the wiring that's actually in the truck as my fuse panel and relays and things like that, which I will show you later. This right here is a coolant filter that I added. You know that from previous, and I just added it back too because I want the coolant to continue to be nice and clean. I've got to change it. It's probably dirty, but it only has like maybe 100 miles on it from the old motor, and but because of how rusty it was, I want to go ahead and change that out as well when I go to start the actual engine. I will have to change that probably a couple of times just to make sure everything is good and clean. So I know that the radiator has a new core, which is why I put this in originally, because the original motor was so rusty inside. So it's hopefully done its job. Can't guarantee that, but we're going to clean out the rest of the system before I put all of that together anyway, and wash that all out with just some water. So that kind of covers the wiring side of this. Now, this little bracket here is the fuel pedal, or the accelerator pedal. And in the newer body styles, which I'm talking like the 60s body styles, they had this same bracket that came through the firewall right here and up, except I believe these were quite a bit longer. And I cut mine down and re-welded it. It did not have, the later models don't have this bracket back here, but that's okay. I left mine because I like the look of it and I like the originality of it, even if I changed things and made them more my own custom style. So all of the wiring that you see here runs to different things. There is some hidden wiring you can't really see back there. These two little lines right here are my transmission lines, the cooler lines, and they just plug right into the transmission. My transmission cooler is hidden way up under here. Maybe I'll get some video of that later today. I don't know for sure. So that's kind of where we stand with everything as far as that's concerned. I am trying to run some wiring down through where the original clutch was. The floor plate had a hole in it where the clutch came down through, and the arm came way down back here. In fact, it kind of came, if you look, you can see a nut and a bolt right here. Right there. It was above that where the original arm came around and did its job. So it came up through like this and then up through here. And I want to run all of this wiring, which is headlights, fuel pump, and tail lights, which that I believe is all of my tail lights. I want all that to run down through there and across the firewall, which is kind of where it's going to end up anyway, because I can extend all of these wires and make them all pretty and whatnot. And I want to run them in the channel of the frame up this way, and then they'll kind of come up where they originally came up. So I'm going to have to add quite a bit of wiring there, but that'll be all right. That's in plans. I'm not super concerned about that. That being black and that being gray doesn't look very good. So, of course, I'm going to paint them instead of take the time to, you know, finish the brakes, which the parts aren't here yet, but still, let's do that. Welcome back. So, as you can see, it's a new day. I'm in a little bit different attire today, but nonetheless, I have something today. And I got some parts in the mail. I got my brake booster, which I'm excited about, and I got my brake master cylinder. So that's kind of what we're going to do today is we're going to install the BrakeMaster cylinder, and as I showed you last time, we are right down, way down there for our BrakeMaster cylinder. So let's begin on that. Before we do though, I got another part, and surprise, surprise, I'm going to do that first because, you know, whatever. I picked up a oil pressure switch right there, and the other one that I had was a normally open switch, but also was built for the original computer to the motor that I have, which is that one. So this one is just a normally open, or apologies, normally closed switch, meaning that there's continuity going between the body of the switch and the blade connector here. Now, if you were a little hawk-eyed and noticed, that's 1/8 inch NPT, and my other switch is 1/4 inch NPT. This is the little switch, or the little T I was talking about. So I'm planning on using a standard actual pressure gauge, and then this to essentially run my fuel pump, and use the dummy light on the dashboard, because obviously she doesn't fit. I do have an adapter for that. All right, I've already got my T positioned at the correct, I say correct, it's not actually correct, it's what I set it to. So I put this on this angle because the body of this, or at least the previous one, was very close to touching the actual block right here. So I put it on this angle. All right, I think that'll do it. That's in nice and tight. I purchased a vacuum brake booster and master cylinder, I believe that comes out of Corvette, from an online source, and I got it for cheap. I got it for like 145 bucks, so I wanted to go ahead and use that. It does have a universal bracket, which I don't necessarily care for the universal bracket. I ended up having to hack it apart, which again you'll see later in the video. And I just ended up using it, but I had to weld it back together after cutting it apart and making everything work the way that I wanted it to. So I purchased a little 2-inch, I think it stands like 2 inches off of the inside of the C channel of the frame rail. So right here on the inside of this, right? Stands like 2 inches off of that. And then I'll have my brake pedal and everything. I don't know how this fits yet, so I have no idea if this is even gonna work. So you get to be the first one to see all of the fun and games with me. The original BrakeMaster cylinder, it's still there and lines are plumbed. They're just kind of bent out of the way. But this is what my brake booster now looks like, and the pedal that runs up to everything. Now you can see that there is airspace right there between the pad and the pad of the bump pad on the firewall and the brake pedal, but I believe that will automatically just kind of fix itself when I get some fluid plumbed to it after I get the new master cylinder in it and all of those things. So that's kind of what it looks like. Now, the actual bracket that I had to cut and weld back together is right back here. And I know it's not a well-lit situation, so just bear with me. But that kind of gives you an idea as to what it ended up looking like and how it ended up being all mounted in there and whatnot. I really like how this BrakeMaster cylinder turned out. I am concerned about the exhaust coming down and being in the way. I bought an exhaust system, like headers for this motor, and they did not turn out what I wanted them to be, but they dropped quite low. So I'm not super concerned about that. I also know that any exhaust shop I go to have the exhaust done, they can probably pipe it out of the way, even if they have to, bring it down a little bit as they make those bends. That's pretty much already in my head as far as it needs to be done, and I'll talk to them about it and see what they can do. If nothing else, they may have to heat it up with a torch and bend it out of the way, which I may have to pay for, but it'll be worth it at that point. So we'll see. The headers that I bought are a really better system for what I'm trying to do because I want to keep the original steering wheel, steering box for now. I also would like to keep that original routing, even if I don't get to keep the original steering box, because I do want to upgrade it to power steering later on. I would like to be able to keep that steering box for now. It's cheaper than having to do all of that literally tomorrow. So that's kind of where we're at with that. All right, here's the motor. So as you can see, I did paint this. They are no longer different colors, but they are different finishes, glossy and matte, which at least for now I don't care about. It looks good from a distance, and that's the most important thing to me right this minute. Eventually, I do have plans to do some cool stuff with these, but I'm going to change them completely. I'm not even going to have these rocker covers at all. So that's down the line just a little bit. I just wanted them to look somewhat the same for, tomorrow, today kind of thing. Keeps me busy and breaks up the time in doing other things. So let's talk a little bit about what I've got going on with the motor, what I've kind of done, plans for the future, so on and so forth with this. I want to start up on top, and then we'll move down to some other things down here, the oil pressure switch and the bracket that runs along here. Let's get around there and look at what's actually going on with everything. Carburetor, of course, sits on here. I've got some rags plugging everything. Not the best, but I'm going to vacuum all this out as best I can anyway before I pull those rags out. Yeah, so right down here, I bought some springs, and I needed a way for the return springs. I needed some throttle return springs, and these worked out good. I just bought them at AutoZone. They are, they're good return springs. They were relatively cheap. I think they cost me like $10. I did a little bit of self-adjustment on these. Like I made them kind of my own. I bent this bigger one. I bent these offsets into the spring because I wanted this center spring to really stay out of the way of everything. So if I pull on this, right now, it stays really, really nice and centered, not catching anything. And I'm not worried about those offsets bending out of shape, because if they do, I can just rebend them into shape. I thought this was kind of cool. I took an old wrench that I had a spare of and a nut that fit inside and welded these together because I needed a spring return, and I bought a bracket for this. But nowhere that I mounted it. I wanted to mount it on one of these, or up here there's another, this axis that I could have mounted it on as well. However, it wasn't the right distance, so these springs were just too short for either mounting situation, whether it was back here or whether it was up here. And I obviously already have a bracket that I built here for all of my electrical and my fuel, and so I couldn't use these two studs either here or here, and it all just kind of worked out. I also really like this idea of using this old wrench and a nut that's welded to it, and I want to continue this idea with the top of the carburetor, the air intake. I want to take a couple of little 1/4-inch wrenches that I also have that are spares and weld them to a nut and make those my wing nut for the air intake on the carburetor. So that all kind of, looks really cool, and it'll match with this. Here, as you can see, this is the Deutsch style pin connector. Come on, focus. There we go. This is the pin style Deutsch connector that I used for the distributor, right? For the Hall effect sensor that goes into that. And the purpose of that disconnect, like I said before, was because of this situation right here. I can pull the motor out and just simply disconnect these. And I don't have to worry about trying to tear the coil off the firewall or anything along those lines. Right down here is the oil pressure switch and the oil pressure outlet. So this is my switch. This is the outlet for my mechanical gauge that will go in the truck. And this, of course, is the T. Now, I put this on this angle because the switch was really close to touching the block, and I wanted it to kind of stay away from the block a little bit. And so that angle kind of self-decided as to how I wanted that to sit. And that was kind of a pain to get in there. I know you can buy really fancy versions of this, but this was much cheaper, and I was able to get these parts really, really quickly. I just went down to my hardware store and picked those up. Turned out really much better than I thought it would. I thought I'd have to go buy one of those more expensive versions, and the prettier versions, whatever. I may end up changing this to that prettier version eventually, but for now, this is plenty good. This will work great. Transmission dipstick is now good and set in stone. As you can see, I bolted it here on the block. I did have to do some changing and some bending to this to really get it to sit in here like I wanted it to. It's a little bit taller than I really would have liked. I would have loved to have it come down really like about right here, but it fits in the truck space quite nicely. You can see it, you can get to it, it's easily accessible, all of the good things. So I'm gonna leave it as it is unless I can find a better transmission dipstick that really fits the truck feel, and I'm not gonna spend an arm and a leg doing that. Might be able to get one off of like a 302 or an older version of the truck that would have been or an older version of this motor that would have been carbureted, if it fits the transmission port down here. I don't have the computer for this yet, though I'm working on that. And I will get the computer for this and get everything hooked up, but I've got to do some more research on some of the things, some of the internals, especially the electronic internals for that computer, because I think this has the wrong internals. But with the spare transmission that I have being newer, I might be able to just pull parts out of it because they'll fit in this. They're just different voltage parts. This one, I believe, has a 5-volt overdrive solenoid, and the one that I need is like a 10-volt overdrive solenoid. So I believe that's going to have to change, but I'm not quite sure yet. I want to bring you inside the truck and show you the fuse panel and relay panel that I've built. Now, I have pictures of what I started with, and I changed that. And I changed it for good reason. I really fell in love with the fuse panel that I have that lights up when the fuse is either blown out or it's not showing, as I'm wiring it and testing things, it's not showing a ground, meaning that something's not hooked up properly or something's not hooked up correctly. And because of how much I fell in love with that, I actually found a couple of smaller versions of that, and so I changed over to those. I also realized I didn't need quite as many constant voltage fuses as I thought I would, and so I went with a much smaller, well, I shouldn't say much smaller, I went with less fuses for that panel specifically. Let's get you in under the truck, and I will show you what I mean. Welcome to the underside of the dashboard. So these are the fuse panels I was talking about. I have a switched, and a constant voltage all kind of laid up under here. And then back here, these are all of my relays that I ran for different things. They are labeled. Sorry, my arm's in the way. things like the cigarette lighter that I was talking about, and then, you know, other little things. So this constant voltage fuse panel, this really has the form factor I really like. As you can see right here, these are the little lights I was talking about. These kick on when it's hooked up, when you have something hooked up correctly. So it has a power, it has a ground. It will see that, and then this little light will kick on if the fuse is blown or if there's no fuse at all, right? So I have some that don't have any fuses in them. And I really like that form factor, because then I can see if something is completely hooked up, or if the fuse is blown, then that little light will kick on and I'll know, hey, that fuse is blown, I need to do something about that. It helps with diagnosing, it helps with all of the little wiring problems that you have. I really like that. So these as well have that little light right there. You can see it there. And then on these as well, you can see it right there. And that kind of gives you an idea. So when I first installed this, I installed it with this clear acrylic. I'm not super sure if I love this clear acrylic sheet for what I've done here. I almost think I should have gone with a colored sheet, just because even though you can see the wiring behind it, it really looks like a mess. Just like in the camera, right? It looks like a mess. So I've thought about going with a different color, something that's opaque rather than a clear acrylic with this. That gives you an introduction as far as like what's under my dashboard, how the wiring ended up. It looked much prettier than this once upon a time, but you know, as you add things and you change wires and all of those things, it looks less and less pretty over time. The wiring that I was talking about with going through where the clutch actually goes is this bit of wiring here. I will tie this up on the firewall, something like this. I haven't decided exactly how that's going to look yet. And then it drops down, if I can get my hand out of the way, it drops down through the floor, like I was saying, like this. It'll drop down through the floor and be all nice and tied up where it'll look nice. So that's kind of where all of that stuff sits. This is my coil right here, and although it doesn't look great, it'll be all right for now. This is all my incoming wiring. You could see that in that loom. It comes through the firewall right here, and just kind of shows you, all of that's running into here as far as main power and whatnot. I do have a few other wires that are not hooked up yet, but that's fine. They're all just kind of there for now. They will get hooked up soon before I start the truck. My plan is to use the original dashboard. All of the lights, all of the gauges on there. I don't know if I can, but I really want to. Right now, the fuel is still functioning out of the original dashboard. I still get my fuel level off of that, and it is correct. It still functions, it's correct, all the good things. My temperature, that one is my iffy one. I would need to add a second coolant temperature sender unit, like out of the actual manifold. And I can't decide if that's something I want to do, or if it's something that I will do, or if it's something at all that I even am going to hook up. I do want to go ahead and use the speedometer and the odometer if I can out of it, or in the original dashboard. I like those. I also want to go forward with using the original turn signal locations, the original dash lights, like the illumination lights. I want to use all of that. Off of the original switch as well. So I've installed some LED lights behind it. Those look really good. I was using those before I tore out the old motor. And I was running those, and they work really, really good. I really, really like those. I do want to see if I can update a few things over time. But those are kind of in the future, and I haven't decided exactly what I want to go with. There's some companies out there that make some really cool gauge boards, and those are really expensive because this is a 1-year only truck. All right, so here's the original dashboard to the truck. I don't know that it's original for miles, but I know that when I bought the truck, this was the gauge cluster that's in it, and it's correct as far as time period and some of the oxidation and whatnot on the dashboard. This looks to be original. I replaced the gasket that goes around this with just a body gasket, like that goes on the edge of the door. It was cheap, and I needed something because the original one was toast. So here's what I was talking about. Here is my oil light. Let's get some background illumination turned off here. There, that's better. Here's my oil light, and as you can see, here's the temp gauge, and the temp gauge just goes cold to hot. And like I said, I don't want to use the cold and hot, except for it would be cool to use if I get in the truck and somebody's like, oh, does that work? I want it to work. Over here is my battery light, and I will get it to function with the alternator, but for now I haven't figured that one out because I haven't got the truck running. And then over here is the fuel gauge, and the fuel gauge does function. In fact, I think if I kick this on right now, we might actually see... Oh, you know what? I don't have any power. My battery's unhooked. So it does function. I really like using the original gauge. All of my dash lights function, including the high beam light that is right there. It all works. This is the original light switch, the headlight switch, whatever, so it does pull like it's supposed to. This is not the original key switch, and I want to get an original looking key switch. I have yet to find one for a decent price. Wipers, I have the handle for this. I just took it off because I was messing with things inside of the dashboard. This is a button that I put in, and I really, really like having a button down here, but I would like to have the original key switch that's a 4-position key switch. Over here, I have the cigarette lighter, which still will function. It's wired in, ready to go. And down here is the mechanical choke, and that will also function. Originally, this bracket would have looked like this on both sides, where it's kind of got this slope up to these. And I just cut it off and re-welded it so it looks like that. And the whole purpose in doing that was because part of the leaf spring bracketry came to here, and on the frame it was riveted, and I didn't want to break those rivets. They're still holding, they're good rivets, I don't want to mess with them, so I'm not going to worry about it. I just cut this off, turned it around, and as you can see, I welded it back on. Not the greatest welds in the world, but I'm not the greatest welder, so especially with the fact that I'm using a cheap Harbor Freight welder. So there you go, that's the bracket in all its glory. You can see I definitely didn't put a second coat of paint on it. It's not by any stretch of anyone's imagination perfect, but it'll do for what I need. So we're going to mark those holes and cut it out, or drill those out, so that they're all nice and pretty and functional. I'm a big fan of using what hardware I can, where I can, how I can, so we're going to start with this bolt right here. She's gonna go in. I'm finishing up the bracket that I cut apart and re-welded back together.
to essentially make something where it would function for what my application is. I probably could have bought a better product and it would have been just like a straight bolt-in, but I'm cheap and I got this one for like 145 bucks, so I didn't.
So that's the 56F100. You've now seen everything I've been working on, all the little ins and outs. I know there was a lot going on here, but that's because it's a project and it's my project, it's my hobby. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little tour around the truck, show you what's going on, show you where I'm at with it, so on and so forth. I really appreciate you spending time. To my Uncle Bart, thank you also for watching this. Let me know if you liked something about this. And for everybody else too, if you liked it, let me know. Click the little thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Otherwise, thanks for coming to Iron Horse History. Thanks for showing your support. Appreciate it. We'll see you later.